When the Galxaris Empire arrives on Earth, humanity thinks they're here to invade, but they're actually fleeing a darker force. Can humans help them? In the vast expanse of space, humanity had always wondered what lay beyond their reach. What civilizations, what unknowns lurked in the dark folds of the galaxy. But the last thing anyone expected was this. On an ordinary Tuesday, with the hum of Earth's routine, far too comfortable for its own good, the universe decided it was time to remind the planet just how insignificant it truly was. And it did so in the most startling way possible. A colossal ship, unlike anything that had ever been recorded, appeared just outside Earth's atmosphere. It wasn't just big, it was immense, towering over cities, casting ominous shadows that seemed to stretch across continents. Its surface was a sleek, dark obsidian, glinting ominously in the sunlight as it silently hovered. It was clear to any observer this was no ordinary craft. The fact that it appeared with such suddenness only heightened the anxiety. At first, the people of Earth assumed it was a satellite malfunction or some kind of experimental space station malfunctioning in orbit. But as minutes ticked by and it didn't move, the truth began to settle in. This was no accident. This was no malfunction. It was something far more deliberate. Around the world, governments went into immediate alert. Military units scrambled to their highest readiness levels. The United Nations convened in an emergency session, representatives from every corner of the globe, desperately searching for answers. The media, of course, only fueled the fire, with every broadcast station and social media channel gleefully reporting the alien invasion of Earth. Speculations flew, theories abounded, and fear gripped the hearts of billions. Was this the beginning of humanity's end? Was Earth about to become the next conquest in some far-off empire's expansion? Yet it was clear to those looking closely at the ship that it wasn't attacking. It wasn't even moving. It simply lingered, as if it were watching, waiting for something, or perhaps simply waiting to be noticed. In the chaos, the few calm voices that tried to suggest a different possibility were drowned out by the growing panic. People were lining up at grocery stores, hoarding supplies in case of the worst. Military jets flew overhead, scrambling to form a perimeter around the unknown entity. In Washington, D.C., the president sat in a room with advisors, his fingers tapping nervously on the arm of his chair. "We have no contact, no response to our signals," said General Walsh, eyes glued to the monitors displaying the massive vessel on every screen. "What are we dealing with here?" "We're dealing with a threat," the president said flatly. "That ship doesn't just hover, it's an invasion, plain and simple." At the same time, far across the world, in a quiet, dimly lit lab tucked away in the heart of the city, Dr. Kaela Enos sat in her chair, her eyes fixed on a screen showing the enormous vessel. The only thing louder than the hum of her computer was the sound of her heartbeat, steady and calm. She wasn't like everyone else. While the world descended into panic, she had an entirely different thought. "This doesn't feel like an invasion. Something's off." But that thought was fleeting. Earth had been preparing for an alien invasion for centuries, and the signs were unmistakable. The ship in the sky didn't just look like a piece of alien tech. It reeked of something much more sinister. The way it hovered so perfectly still, as if it were waiting for Earth to react. The way no one could decipher its intent, no matter how much they tried. The government, the military, everyone was jumping to conclusions, and it was only a matter of time before panic swept the world entirely. Yet as she observed the ship from the safety of her small office, Dr. Enos couldn't shake the feeling that there was something deeply wrong with the narrative that was unfolding. If this was an invasion, it would have been much more aggressive. This was different. It was strange, unsettling. The ship didn't match the usual characteristics of hostile alien forces. No weapons, no signs of impending destruction. It was simply waiting. This is where her journey would begin. While the world was busy preparing for a fight, Dr. Enos, with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity, volunteered to be part of the first official human contact team. The hope was simple: find out what the ship was, why it was here, and what the intentions of its inhabitants were. However, little did she know that the answers she sought would reveal something far more complex than a simple alien invasion. As the Earth held its breath, the Galxaris Empire had already made its move. But not to conquer, no. They were running from something far worse. Governments and military organizations scrambled to respond to the supposed threat. Military units were put on high alert, and various countries declared a state of emergency. The United Nations called for an emergency session, and the world's leaders convened to discuss what action should be taken. We cannot afford to wait any longer. This is a direct threat to our existence, said President Matthews, his voice resolute as he sat at the head of the table. General Walsh leaned over the map displayed on the large screen, pointing to the hovering ship's location. The ship has been stationary for hours, no communication, no movement. If they wanted to attack, we'd already be under fire. But why are they here then? President Matthews asked, his fingers tapping anxiously on the table. What do they want? We don't know, Sir General Walsh replied, his brow furrowed. But we need to prepare for the worst. We cannot risk being caught off guard. Meanwhile, across the world in various cities, the panic was palpable. People flooded grocery stores, stockpiling food and supplies, as if an impending catastrophe was inevitable. In the streets, children clung to their parents as rumors of alien invasions spread like wildfire. Mom, is it true? Are they really going to invade a young boy? Asked, tugging at his mother's sleeve as they stood in line. I don't know, sweetheart, his mother replied, her voice trembling slightly. But we need to stay calm. We'll be fine. Back in Washington, D.C., the president continued his conversation with his military advisors. This ship doesn't act like an invasion force, said General Walsh as he studied the ship's movements, or lack thereof. It's almost like they're waiting for us to make the first move. President Matthews looked at the screen in silence, his mind racing. I don't know what they want, but I have a feeling we're about to find out. The media, of course, continued to stir the pot. Is this the end of humanity? Asked a news anchor, his voice dripping with dramatic tension. Experts are warning that the ship may be a precursor to an all-out attack on Earth. Stay tuned for more updates. If this continues, said Dr. Kaela Enos, her voice calm but firm as she addressed the committee, the fear we're seeing will escalate into something far worse. We need to approach this rationally. What do you suggest we do? Dr. Enos asked one of the committee members. Sit back and wait for them to decide our fate? Dr. Kaela Enos had always been calm under pressure, her mind working quickly and efficiently, even in the most chaotic of situations. As a sociologist and expert in invasive sciences, she had spent her career studying human behavior and the subtle dynamics of first contact. When the call came for a team to attempt communication with the Galxaris Empire, she was the obvious choice. You're the best we've got, Kaela. The world's counting on you. President Matthews said, his voice steady but heavy with the weight of responsibility. Kaela gave a small nod, her face neutral but focused. I understand, Mr. President, but I'll need complete access to the data we've gathered, including the signals we've sent out. We may be dealing with something entirely different from what anyone expects. Of course, the president replied, a touch of unease in his tone. Whatever you need, Kaela. You're in charge now. Kaela turned to her team. As the world's foremost experts in linguistic sociology and alien biology, they were all highly qualified. But there was one thing none of them could prepare for: the unknown. Listen up, Kaela said as she stood in front of the gathered team, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. This is uncharted territory for all of us. We don't know who they are, what they want, or how they'll react to us. We need to stay calm, remain flexible, and adapt to whatever happens. The fate of Earth could depend on our ability to make contact peacefully. Dr. Tae-Hyun Cho, a former military strategist and one of the team members, raised an eyebrow. Peacefully, they've been hovering above us for hours. The shuttle descended through the clouds, its engines humming softly as it neared the massive Galxaris ship. Dr. Kaela Enos and her team were seated in silence, the weight of the moment pressing heavily on them. This wasn't just a routine mission, it was the first step towards understanding an alien civilization. As they approached, the Galxaris ship loomed even larger, its dark metallic surface reflecting the light of the sun. It was beautiful in its alien elegance, but it was also imposing, filled with an aura of mystery and power. We're almost there, Kaela said, her voice calm, though her heart was racing. She could feel the tension in the shuttle, the quiet whispers of her team, as they prepared for what could be a life-altering moment. Remember, we're here to understand, not to fight, Kaela reminded them, looking at each team member in turn. If we start off with fear, we'll never get the answers we need. The shuttle touched down softly on the platform of the Galxaris ship, the landing gears engaging with a low hum. The door opened and the team stepped out onto the alien vessel, the air cool and metallic, filled with the faint scent of something unfamiliar. At the base of the ship, standing tall and imposing, was Commander Marathson. He was dressed in the ornate armor of the Galxaris military, his posture rigid, his eyes locked onto the humans with a mixture of wariness and curiosity. "Welcome, humans," Marathson said, his voice deep and resonant, though there was a hint of uncertainty behind the formal greeting. "I am Commander Marathson of the Galxaris Empire. We come in peace." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. The Galxaris representatives stood like statues, their expressions unreadable, while Kaela and her team remained on edge, trying to navigate the complex cultural landscape of first contact. Kaela shifted slightly, trying to ease the pressure. She had always believed in the power of humor to diffuse tension, even in the most serious of situations. Her quick wit had gotten her out of many tight spots in her life, and she knew it could work now. "You know," Kaela began, her voice light and playful, "I read once that the hardest thing for an alien species to understand about humans is our obsession with breakfast foods." A few members of the Galxaris team shifted, clearly confused. Marathson, who had been silently observing her, raised an eyebrow. "Breakfast foods," Marathson repeated, his voice heavy with suspicion. "What is this?" "Breakfast," Kaela grinned, realizing the perfect opportunity to break the ice. "Well, it's a tradition of sorts. You know, like pancakes, bacon, eggs, things we eat when we wake up. It's like a cultural ritual. Humans are very fond of them, and it's one of the first things we talk about in the morning." Marathson looked puzzled, glancing at his fellow officers. "Pancakes, bacon?" he asked again, the confusion evident in his voice. "Yes," Kaela said, her tone playful. "It's one of the things that makes us, well, human. Our love for food is, I think, one of the things that keeps us grounded. We bond over it. It's a universal language, really. The universal language of hunger." A long pause followed. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence was palpable, and Kaela wondered if her attempt at humor had been a complete failure. But then, unexpectedly, one of the Galxaris officers, a young woman with short hair and a neutral expression, stepped forward. "You mean, this breakfast is a ritual of sorts?" she asked, her voice cautiously curious. Kaela smiled, sensing an opening. "Exactly. And if you ever visit Earth, I promise you the best pancakes you'll ever taste. They're out of this world." For a split second, Kaela saw the smallest flicker of amusement in Marathson's eyes. It was fleeting, but it was there. She had done it. Perhaps this pancake could be the key to peace, Marathson said dryly, his tone finally softening. The team shared a collective sigh of relief, and for the first time since their arrival, the atmosphere in the room lightened. Kyla's unconventional approach had worked. Her use of humor had broken the ice and created a small bridge of trust between the two species. "Well," Kaela said, her smile widening, "let's make sure our next meeting doesn't revolve around breakfast foods." The room had settled into an uneasy calm, the initial shock of their encounter with the Galxaris Empire now giving way to a more cautious dialogue. But despite the tentative connection, Kaela knew they had only scratched the surface of what the Galxaris were truly dealing with. There was still so much they didn't understand. Marathson stood before them, his posture rigid, his expression conflicted. The time had come, it seemed, to reveal the truth that had been hidden for so long. "You need to understand something," Marathson began, his voice heavy with the weight of what he was about to say. "We are not here to conquer your world. We are not invaders. We are survivors." Kaela leaned forward slightly, her heart pounding. "Survivors from what?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marathson paused, his gaze distant, as if he were remembering something painful. The room was silent as they all waited for his answer. "We are fleeing from an ancient entity," he said, his voice tinged with a rare vulnerability. "A force that has hunted us for centuries, and now it is hunting you." The words hung in the air, thick with fear and uncertainty. Kaela exchanged a glance with her team, trying to digest what they had just heard. "What do you mean?" Kaela asked, her voice trembling slightly. "What is this entity? What does it want?" Marathson's face darkened. "It is a being older than your civilization. It exists beyond the boundaries of your reality. It is not something you can comprehend with your limited understanding of the universe." Kaela's mind raced. A being beyond their reality. The implications were staggering, impossible to fully grasp, and yet she couldn't ignore the unease settling in her stomach. This was bigger than they could have ever imagined. It feeds on fear, on the desperation of those it hunts. It makes its prey feel helpless, weak, so that it can consume them. Marathon's voice hardened as he spoke, a deep anger rising in him. And when it comes for you, you will not be able to hide. It will find you no matter where you are, and it will not stop until you are gone. The team sat in stunned silence, absorbing the weight of his words. The enemy Marathon described was beyond anything they had ever faced or imagined, a creature that could bend reality itself, feeding on the very fear it created. You think we're safe here? Marathon continued, his voice rising with urgency. It's already started looking for us, and soon it will be here. Your world, your people. They will not be spared. No one is safe. Kaela's heart skipped a beat. She had never heard fear like this in a voice before, and the realization of the gravity of their situation hit her hard. The fate of the entire planet was now tied to the survival of an alien empire, and the humans themselves were in danger of being caught in the crossfire. Then we fight, Kaela said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside her. We fight together. Marathon met her gaze, the flicker of a grudging respect in his eyes. You are brave, but I warn you, this is no ordinary enemy. Despite the urgency of their situation, despite the looming threat of the ancient entity, Marathon still hesitated. His people had faced nothing but conflict in their dealings with other civilizations, and now, after centuries of war, he found himself unable to simply trust the humans. I don't understand why you're so willing to help us, Marathon said, his voice edged with suspicion. Why should I trust you after everything you've seen, everything we've shown you? How do I know you won't turn on us when the time comes? Kaela looked at him, her gaze unwavering. Because we don't want to fight, she said simply. We're not like the others you've encountered. We're different. You've seen that already. Different. Marathon's voice was laced with doubt. You're all the same, all of you driven by self-interest, by fear. I've seen it in every civilization we've encountered. That may be true for some, Kaela said, but not for all of us. Humans are capable of cooperation, of working together to overcome a greater threat. And we want to help you. But that starts with trust. Trust is earned, not given, Marathon replied curtly. And I have seen little to earn it from your species. There was a long silence, the weight of Marathon's words hanging in the air. Kaela knew he was right in some ways. Her people had often been driven by fear and self-interest, but she believed in the potential for change. She believed in the goodness of humanity. How can I prove to you that we're different? Kaela asked, her voice soft but firm. Marathon's eyes flickered briefly, and for a moment, Kaela thought he might finally say something. But instead he looked away, his gaze hardening once more. I don't know if you can, he admitted, but we don't have time for this. We need to work together, but trust is something we will have to build over time. Kaela nodded slowly. I understand, but we have to start somewhere. And if that starts with helping you, then I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Marathon studied her for a moment longer, the weight of centuries of distrust reflected in his eyes. Finally he spoke again, his voice softer, though still carrying an edge of doubt. Very well, Dr. Enos. For now we will cooperate. But don't think that trust has been established. Kaela nodded again, though she knew the road ahead would not be easy. But this was a start, and in this moment it was enough. The days following the revelation of the true threat were tense, filled with strategic meetings and planning sessions between the humans and the Galxaris Empire. The humans were trying to devise a plan that could work against an entity so powerful, so ancient, that even the Galxaris had been unable to defeat it. Despite the gravity of their situation, Kaela found herself marveling at the ingenuity of her fellow humans. They were using their creativity in ways that even the Galxaris had never considered. Ideas flowed freely, each more unconventional than the last. What if we use the enemy's fear against them? One of Kaela's team members, Dr. Alan Greaves, suggested. Fear is what makes them powerful, right? So if we can find a way to reverse that, maybe we can weaken them. Marathon looked at him skeptically. You want to fight an entity that bends reality with fear. It's not the fear itself, Commander Kaela interjected. It's the manipulation of that fear. Humans are incredibly adaptable. We have a way of using things that others might see as weaknesses, turning them into our strengths. We've done it before, another team member, Tai Hyun Cho, added. In warfare, we use tactics that confuse our enemies, make them question their own senses. What if we could do that to this entity? Kaela nodded, a spark of inspiration lighting up in her mind. Yes, we've already seen how this entity feeds on fear, how it uses it to manipulate and control. But what if we could disrupt that? If we could create confusion, disorient it, maybe it wouldn't be able to feed on fear anymore. The Galxaris representatives, who had been silent up until now, exchanged uneasy glances. Marathon stepped forward, his expression wary but intrigued. "And how exactly do you plan to do that?" he asked, his voice cautious. Kaela smiled slightly, feeling the weight of her idea as it took shape. By using its own fear against it. We'll create a simulated environment, one that it can't control, where it will feel as vulnerable as it makes others feel. It's a psychological strategy. The Galxaris officers exchanged uncertain looks. This was a plan unlike anything they had ever conceived. For the first time, they were seeing humans not just as primitive beings, but as a species capable of thinking in ways that could challenge even their advanced technologies. Morrison remained silent for a moment, clearly weighing the risks. Then slowly he nodded. "You may be onto something, Dr. Enos, but this is uncharted territory for us. We are relying on you." Kaela met his gaze, determination in her eyes. "We'll make it work. Together." As the team gathered their materials and began setting up their plan, the Galxaris officers observed them with growing interest. For the first time, they weren't just seeing humans as another species to dominate. They were beginning to see them as equals capable of working alongside them to face the coming storm. The atmosphere had shifted. What began as a tense standoff between two civilizations had slowly morphed into something else, something far more complicated, yet more hopeful. The decision had been made: humans and the Galxaris Empire would unite. "It's not going to be easy," Kaela said, standing in front of the Galxaris officers who had gathered in a large conference room aboard their ship. "We've got different ways of doing things, different cultures, different methods." Marathon, who had been silent up until now, finally spoke. "We've faced countless conflicts in the past, and we've seen how cooperation can sometimes fail." His voice was heavy with experience, tinged with the weariness of endless battles. "But we also know that survival often requires the unthinkable, and we are willing to try." "Then let's make it work," Kaela replied, her tone firm yet welcoming. "We'll start by sharing everything we know. Our knowledge of this entity, our resources, our technology. Together we can find a way to fight it." The Galxaris officers exchanged uncertain looks, but Marathon stood tall, his expression resolute. "Very well, we'll share our knowledge of the entity as well. It is unlike anything we have encountered before. But if we are to defeat it, we must pool everything we know." As the two groups gathered their resources and began to form a joint strategy, Kaela felt a sense of unity that had been missing for so long. They weren't just two different species now. They were allies, united against an enemy so powerful that even their combined forces might not be enough. "We have different methods, but we both want the same thing," Kaela said, addressing the group. "We want to survive. We want to protect our people. And that's the foundation of this alliance. Trust, cooperation, and a shared goal." Tai-Hyun Cho stepped forward, a small grin on his face. "Let's just make sure the pancakes are on the menu when it's over," he said, trying to lighten the mood. The Galxaris officers, though, unsure of the reference, found themselves chuckling. Even Marathon let out a small chuckle, a sound that was unfamiliar on his lips. For a moment, the tension in the room dissolved, replaced by a sense of camaraderie. "Perhaps this is the start of something greater," Marathon said quietly, his tone less guarded than before. "We will face this enemy together, and we will do whatever it takes to protect both our worlds." Kaela nodded, feeling a sense of resolve settle in her chest. "Together we stand a chance, and we will win." As the two civilizations began to merge their knowledge, resources, and strategies, a new hope began to take root. Despite their differences, humanity and the Galxaris Empire had found common ground, and they would face the greatest challenge of their lives side by side. The time for preparation was over. The Galxaris and humans had united, formed an alliance, and put their collective minds together in an attempt to defeat the dark force that had hunted them for centuries. It was a force so powerful, so ancient, that no one could fully comprehend its true nature. Yet despite their best efforts, the enemy was closing in on them. It started with a faint tremor in the fabric of reality itself, a distortion that rippled through the very air around them, like a veil being torn. The Galxaris technology had detected at first a shift in the atmosphere, the moment when the dark force's presence was felt like a suffocating shadow creeping through the galaxy. A storm was coming, and there was no way to hide from it. Kaela Enos stood at the helm of the command center, her eyes glued to the holographic display in front of her. The combined forces of the humans and Galxaris had constructed a formidable defense network around their makeshift battleground, but she knew it wouldn't be enough. They were dealing with an enemy unlike any other, an entity that manipulated not just space, but time itself. "I've seen it," one of the Galxaris officers said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's here." And with those words, it came an unstoppable, omnipotent presence that shattered the defenses they had so carefully constructed. It was a being of pure darkness, an amorphous mass that seemed to absorb all light around it, growing larger with each passing second. Its very form was impossible to comprehend, shifting and writhing like a living nightmare. It moved through space as though it were the very void itself, an endless, consuming force. "Ready yourselves," Morrison shouted. His voice was authoritative, but there was an edge of fear in it now, something Kaela had never heard from him before. The first wave of attack came without warning. The creature's power was felt before it was seen, an invisible pressure that weighed down on their minds and bodies, suffocating them in its grasp. The humans and Galxaris forces, already positioned in their defensive formations, fired everything they had. Laser blasts lit up the dark expanse of space, streaks of energy crackling against the creature's form. But none of it made a dent. The dark force simply absorbed it, as if it were nothing more than a fleeting annoyance. "Deploy the shield generators," shouted one of the Galxaris commanders, but his orders were drowned out by the oppressive weight of the creature's power. The shield generators flickered on, but the dark energy swept across them like a tidal wave, rendering them useless in an instant. Kaela watched in horror as the creature approached. It was more than just an enemy. They were facing an entity that defied all natural laws, an abomination that had no place in the universe. It was beyond comprehension. The Galxaris, with all their advanced technology, had no answers. Humans, with all their ingenuity, had no solution either. This is impossible," Morrison muttered, his usual composure beginning to crack. But even in the face of such terror, Kaela could not abandon her sense of hope. She knew that their best chance lay not in brute force, but in something else, their creativity, their ability to think beyond the obvious. The humans, as unpredictable and chaotic as they were, had a unique advantage: the ability to improvise. "We need to hit it with something it can't absorb," Kaela said urgently. "Something unexpected." Tai Hyun Cho stepped forward, his eyes wide with realization. "We need to disrupt its perception," he said. "It feeds on fear, right? What if we create an illusion, something that messes with its senses?" Kaela nodded, her mind racing. "Yes, we can't fight it with weapons. It's not physical. But if we can trick its mind, disrupt its ability to sense fear, maybe we can weaken it long enough to land a real blow." The battle against the dark force had reached a critical point. What had started as a series of skirmishes now turned into an all-out war. The combined forces of the humans and the Galxaris Empire had been pushed to their limits, facing a relentless enemy that was as cunning as it was powerful. The creature had adapted to every strategy. They had tried its attacks, seemingly designed to destroy any semblance of unity between them. Yet despite everything, they continued to fight. The dark force, now more determined than ever, attacked with a precision that seemed to anticipate their every move. Its shadowy tendrils slithered through space, striking with an unholy speed and power. It was everywhere, appearing where they least expected, attacking from multiple angles, overwhelming them with its relentless assault. No matter how they adjusted their tactics, the creature was always one step ahead, exploiting their weaknesses with terrifying accuracy. The Galxaris, with their advanced technology and military might, had always believed they were unbeatable. But now, faced with this dark force that could absorb their attacks, adapt to their strategies, and warp reality itself, even they were beginning to question their invincibility. For the first time in centuries, the mighty Galxaris found themselves on the defensive, unsure of how to turn the tide. "We can't keep up with this pace," shouted one of the human commanders, watching helplessly as their defenses crumbled under the weight of the Dark Force's assault. The energy shields they had once trusted so much flickered weakly before collapsing entirely, leaving them exposed. The Galxaris ships, powerful as they were being battered back by the Dark Force's overwhelming might. Kaela Enos stood at the helm of the command center, her eyes glued to the holographic display in front of her. She watched the battle unfold, the data streaming in from all sides. The combined forces of the humans and the Galxaris had constructed a formidable defense network around their makeshift battleground, but she knew it wouldn't be enough. They were dealing with an enemy unlike any other, an entity that manipulated not just space but time itself. It could see through their strategies, anticipate their next moves, and adapt in real time. And it wasn't just absorbing their attacks, it was learning from them. "Kaela," Marassan's voice crackled over the comms, his tone laced with urgency. "This isn't working. We're being overwhelmed. What do you suggest we do?" Kaela took a deep breath, trying to suppress the panic that threatened to rise within her. She had studied fear in psychology her entire career, both the fear of others and the way it could manipulate people. But she had never faced anything like this before. The Dark Force was different. It wasn't just a predator, it was a force of nature, a force of pure destruction that operated on a level they couldn't fully comprehend. "We can't just keep throwing everything at it," Kaela muttered under her breath, more to herself than to Marassan. "It's too adaptive. We have to do something it doesn't expect. We need to make it doubt itself." She turned toward Taehyun Cho, who had been pacing nervously, eyes scanning the battlefield. Taehyun was a veteran of countless human battles, but even he looked out of his element here. His military mind was designed to think in terms of direct combat, but this was different. There was no enemy to fight in a conventional sense. The Dark Force wasn't just attacking, it was disorienting their every move, erasing their ability to see clearly, to understand what they were up against. "What if we use its own fear against it?" Taehyun suggested, his voice firm, with the kind of resolve that only came from a seasoned soldier. "Fear is what makes it powerful, right? So if we can find a way to reverse that, maybe we can weaken it." Marassan looked at him skeptically. "You want to fight an entity that bends reality with fear?" Kaela stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the screens before her. "It's not the fear itself, Commander. It's the manipulation of that fear. Humans are incredibly adaptable. We have a way of using things that others might see as weaknesses, turning them into our strengths." Taehyun Cho stepped forward, his eyes wide with realization. "We need to disrupt its perception," he said, his mind clearly racing. "It feeds on fear, right? What if we create an illusion, something that messes with its senses?" Kaela nodded, her mind racing. "Yes, we can't fight it with weapons, it's not physical. But if we can trick its mind, disrupt its ability to sense fear, maybe we can weaken it long enough to land a real blow." The final battle had arrived. The humans in Galxaris Empire, their combined forces pushed to the brink, had one last chance to defeat the Dark Force that had terrorized them for so long. Desperation fueled their every move as they prepared for a final confrontation that would decide the fate of their worlds. "This is it," Kaela said, her voice tight with the weight of the moment. She stared at the holographic map before her, her finger tracing the battle lines. "We either win here, or everything we fought for is lost." Marassan stood next to her, the usually composed commander, now showing signs of doubt. His people had fought countless wars, but never against something like this. "Are we ready for this? It feels different," he muttered, his eyes scanning the battlefield ahead. Kaela turned to him, her face set with determination. "We have no choice. We've come this far together, and we will finish this together." The Dark Force, sensing the final showdown, advanced toward them with terrifying speed. Its tendrils lashed out, causing rifts in the very fabric of space as it came. It wasn't just attacking, it was warping reality itself, creating distortions that made the battlefield feel like a nightmare. "It's bending space around us," Taehyun Cho shouted from the control center, his voice edged with fear. "We won't be able to track its movements if this keeps up." Kayla's mind raced as she considered their options. They had no more tricks, no more hidden weapons left. Their only hope lay in combining their strengths, human ingenuity, and Galxaris technology. "We need to disrupt its perception of space. If we can do that, we can get an opening," she said, looking at Marassan. Marathon's eyes narrowed. How Kaela gestured to the holographic map where the combined forces of the humans and Galxaris were positioned. We set up a series of false signals, deceptive energy readings, disinformation. If we can trick it into thinking we're attacking from one direction while we hit it from another, we might stand a chance. Tae-hyun Cho's face lit up as he processed her plan. A double deception. If we can create enough confusion, it might give us the edge we need. Then we move out, Marathon said, his voice decisive. Galxaris will support your deception. Humans will lead the charge. Let's show this creature what happens when it underestimates us. The forces moved quickly, coordinating their efforts with precision. The Galxaris ships began emitting false energy readings, their advanced technology creating an illusion of a massive assault coming from the left side of the battlefield. Meanwhile, the humans, using their agility and adaptability, prepared to strike from the right. The dark force, overwhelmed by the conflicting signals, hesitated. For a split second it faltered, and that was enough. Now, Kaela shouted, her voice full of urgency. The Galxaris ships fired their cannons, creating a barrage that distracted the creature just long enough for the humans to move in. The humans launched their strike, coordinated with the Galxaris fire. They struck at the heart of the dark force with everything they had: energy blasts, missiles, and a final desperate strike powered by a combination of human ingenuity and Galxaris technology. The dark force screamed in agony, its form unraveling under the concentrated onslaught. With a final deafening roar, the creature was defeated, disintegrating into nothingness. Silence descended on the battlefield. The humans and Galxaris, exhausted but victorious, stood in the wake of their hard-earned triumph. The dark force was no more, but the cost had been high. We did it, Kaela whispered, a mix of disbelief and relief in her voice. We actually did it. Marathon turned to her, his eyes reflecting both exhaustion and admiration. Yes, we did. Together. For the first time, I truly believe in what humans can accomplish. The victory had come, but it was not without its cost. The final battle against the Dark Force had tested the limits of both humanity and the Galxaris Empire, pushing them to the brink of destruction. And yet, despite the overwhelming odds and the monumental sacrifices, they had triumphed. The Dark Force, once an insurmountable threat, was gone. The universe, it seemed, could finally breathe again. But in the aftermath, something had changed in both civilizations. The war had ended, but a new chapter had begun, one that would define the future of both humans and the Galxaris. Kaela Enos stood at the helm of the Vanguard, staring into the vast emptiness of space. The ship's bridge was quiet, save for the occasional hum of machinery and the soft murmur of voices from the crew. Her eyes were fixed on the stars in the distance, but her thoughts were elsewhere, on the battle that had just been fought and the price they had paid for victory. She thought back to the days when the humans had first encountered the Galxaris, how they had been viewed with suspicion, fear, and even disdain. It had seemed impossible at the time that two such vastly different civilizations could ever find common ground. But they had. In the heat of battle, humanity's ingenuity and the Galxaris' strength had meshed together, and it had been that union that had led them to victory. Now, as Kaela looked out into the endless expanse of space, she couldn't help but feel a profound sense of pride. They had done it together. Yet as the celebration of victory began to subside, Kaela couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that lingered in her chest. There had been a heavy toll: lives lost, entire fleets, destroyed cities, ravaged. The scars of war would remain not just on the physical landscape, but in the hearts of those who had lived through it. Even so, Kaela knew that something extraordinary had emerged from the ashes. They had forged a connection, an unbreakable bond between the two civilizations. It was a connection that would change everything forever. Marathon, the once stern commander of the Galxaris Empire, approached Kaela. He had been a constant presence at her side during the war, and now, as they both stood in the quiet aftermath, he looked at her with a mixture of exhaustion and something else, something Kaela hadn't seen in him before: the respect. He had always seen humans as primitive, impulsive, and unpredictable, but now he understood them better. He had seen their creativity, their adaptability, and their unyielding resolve, and perhaps for the first time he saw them as equals. We did it, Marathon said, his voice steady but tired. But at what cost, Kaela? Kaela turned to him, her gaze meeting his. The cost was high, she said quietly. Too high. But we have done something here that cannot be undone. We have created a foundation for the future, a foundation built on cooperation, not conflict. Marathon's expression softened. You're right. The war is over, but it feels like we've only just begun. Kaela nodded, her thoughts mirroring his. It was true. The war had been the catalyst that had brought humanity and Galxaris together, but the real work building a lasting alliance, shaping a new future, was just beginning. The end of the war was not an end at all. It was a new beginning. As the Vanguard moved away from the battlefield, its crew began to repair and regroup. The Galxaris ships, though damaged, had proven their strength, and the human fleets had shown their resilience. Both sides had suffered losses, but they had fought together, and that was what mattered now. There was no going back. In the days that followed, Kaela found herself in countless meetings with both human and Galxaris leaders. The purpose of these meetings was clear: to ensure that the hard-won victory would not be squandered, that the alliance formed in the heat of battle would endure. They discussed everything from military strategy to resource management, from diplomacy to technological exchange. The first priority was rebuilding physically, yes, but also emotionally, culturally, and technologically. The story comes to an end with a reflection on the power of humor, creativity, and cooperation in overcoming dark forces. The lasting peace between the two civilizations becomes a symbol of hope for the entire galaxy. Humanity had learned much from the Galxaris and applied their technology to advance scientific development. The first example of this is the integration of Galxaris quantum energy manipulation. The Galxaris had developed the ability to manipulate energy at a quantum level, allowing them to create nearly limitless energy sources. Humanity, with its focus on sustainability, worked alongside the Galxaris to refine this technology, ensuring that it was usable in everyday life without harming the environment. The result was a breakthrough in clean energy technology. Entire cities could now run on virtually unlimited energy without the pollution or depletion of resources that had once been so pervasive on Earth. The second example is the Galxaris medical nanotechnology, which had the potential to revolutionize healthcare. By combining the Galxaris advanced nanobots with human understanding of biology and medical practices, they created a new generation of medical devices and treatments. Diseases that were once untreatable, such as certain forms of cancer and genetic disorders, were now within reach of a cure. Humanity had not only extended its life expectancy, but also alleviated suffering in ways that were previously unimaginable. As the two civilizations continued to grow, they found that they were no longer merely survivors of a great war. They were pioneers of a new age, a new way of thinking, and a new future for all species. The alliance between humanity and Galxaris had become more than just an agreement. It had become a partnership that would propel them forward into a future filled with hope and innovation. Kaela, standing before the new council, addressed the gathered leaders from both civilizations. "We've come a long way," she said, her voice full of emotion. "We've seen the darkest corners of the universe and emerged victorious not through sheer force, but through our ability to cooperate, to innovate, and to keep moving forward. Today we stand not just as allies, but as equals bound by a shared vision for a better future." Marathon, now fully aligned with humanity, nodded in agreement. "Together we will explore new worlds, solve problems that were once insurmountable, and ensure that the mistakes of the past are never repeated. We are the future of the galaxy." The room filled with applause, the first of many such moments to come. A new era had begun, and it was one that would be defined by cooperation, creativity, and the belief that anything was possible when civilizations came together. The future, as it had always been, was in their hands. As the stars shimmered in the vast expanse of space, humanity and the Galxaris stood united, a beacon of hope for the galaxy. Their shared history, fraught with conflict, had transformed into a story of cooperation, growth, and unbreakable bonds. The war had tested them, but it had also brought out the best in both civilizations. Now, side by side, they looked toward the future with optimism. The alliance formed in the heat of battle would become the foundation for generations to come. They had discovered that the true strength of any civilization did not lie in its ability to conquer, but in its capacity to collaborate, innovate, and grow together. They had learned that even in the darkest times, there was always a way forward through trust, unity, and shared dreams. With their combined strengths, humanity and Galxaris set out to explore the stars to unlock the mysteries of the universe and to build a future where peace and prosperity would be the legacy they left for all to follow. This was not just the end of a war, it was the beginning of a new era,